Okay, I wanted to share with you guys how I ran the FSO API lab. The first time I did it didn't work out well for me. I made a bunch of adjustments. The second time it went really smooth. So from a student's perspective, this is what they do. All they do is I pasted the link in the chat and they just have to install Fly. So they click on the icon for their operating system and it's just a little executable. They download it. If it's Linux, they just do, chmod, make it A+X, makes it executable. And then I paste into the chat window for them how to log on. So I ended up adding all my students to one team in Concourse. So I give them the command and they all log in the same way. And they're logging into a team. At this point in time, they're ready to run automation tasks, write and edit code, and make API calls to the environment. I'll explain how that happens under the covers after. But first, I'll just show you that I'm gonna, after teaching the students about how the API works and everything, I take them in, give them, tell them to, well, they clone the repo, and then they cd into the correct directory. So I give them the directory, I put it in the chat, and then I tell them the first thing we're going to do is make an API call to Thousand Eyes to get a list of all the agent IDs. And so the first one I give to them so that they can just learn the workflow process of the lab. So I give them the command and explain it. So they're going to do fly target their pipeline, which they just logged into, execute minus their config file, which is the name of their task file, and then variable the address of our vault. So they go ahead and they hit enter. And what's going to happen is it's going to launch a Concourse task. It's copying actually the code in the working directory up to the ephemeral build container. And that ephemeral build container is able to call Vault. It's able to run on the proper Docker container. It has all the libraries and everything to run the code. So they don't need to install anything locally. They don't need Vault access. They don't need AWS access. They don't need any keys because everything's in the Vault. So what this task does, it goes up to Concourse in the cloud, creates an ephemeral build container, copies the code from the repo that they're working in up onto that container and executes it. So what this means is that the students come into the lab, they can be running any kind of operating system, Linux, Mac, Windows, doesn't matter. They just have to download and install one tool. That's it, nothing else. The container that this code is built on is a curated container with all the libraries, everything, Python version. This ensures that everybody is running their code in the exact identical build container. So there's going to be 100% expected results from all the lab students. So no local code, right? Because we don't want to risk that. Somebody has weird antivirus or who knows what could happen. So it's guaranteed to work. And anyways, it's teaching them the proper software development lifecycle if they're working in DevOps or NetOps, because this is the way we all work. We never do local code development at all. It's always on containers. So what we have done is we have gone out to Thousand Eyes. And now I'm going to explain how it works under the hood. Oh, by the way, they can hack around with their code and they can do experimentation. So say they wanted to see a different type of ID. I don't actually have any enterprise agents installed, but if they wanted to see if there was any enterprise agents installed, all they need to do is actually edit the code. So I would say, okay, you know what? Let's change this from cloud to enterprise. And I don't have any enterprise agents actually installed right now. So this should come back null or an empty array. So I updated my code. Now all I need to do is up arrow, boom, enter. It's pulling the container. It's gonna upload my local code changes to the container and execute them and run them. So it's running right now. So the first thing it's doing is it's printing back the entire JSON response, and then it's saying, yeah, okay, empty array. There's no enterprise agents. That's correct. So again, make another change to our code. We'll say, go get the cloud agents. So cloud. And what I'm telling it here is return me a list of cloud agents and the enterprise ID. By the way, I wrote all this code myself. I had to figure it out. No one at Thousand Eyes even knew how to do this because their API is a monolith and the person who wrote it left the company. So they're rewriting it. So this, I had to hack everything out. It's a very strange API. The JSON responses are weird. It expects you to have specific format when you submit your JSON payload. So let's go ahead. I'm going to change the code. I'm going to run it again. It's going to bring me back all the agents, and then it's going to go through and sort through and get all the cloud agents and get me those agent IDs. So let's run it again. All the student has to do, they may change their code, up arrow, boom. Fresh container, and builds the container fresh from scratch. So the difference between running a task and running it in the pipeline is smart enough to put a hash and cache container. When you're doing local development, this is before you do your git commit, it always pulls a fresh container. Now, okay, so there we go. It did it, it worked. So this allows the students to get right into writing code and executing it immediately with 100% predictable results. When they're happy with it, right, they can commit it to their branch. So they're all working in their own branch. So the idea is every task, every time they get it working, they do a git commit. And as an instructor, I can see all the git commits to the branches. And then at the end of the section, they build in pipeline. So then they get to see their code build through the whole pipeline, which is really fun. They love it. And so I can give everybody their own pipeline and they can watch their code run in the pipeline. So the pipelines are made up of many tasks. So at the end of the module, they may have edited or written maybe 5, 6, 7 tasks to get different variations of SD1, right? And then at the end of that, they're going to build the whole thing. So they start out doing individual tasks, testing them. And then at the end, they do their commit and their branch, and they build their branch in the pipeline. And so there's a GUI login, obviously, to see the pipeline in GUI mode. So yep, CI. So, you know, they come here. So they've gone through building their task. Now they're going to build the pipeline. They come in here and they log in. See their pipeline, and they can start it and they can build their code, and they can build it all at once, or they can build it piece by piece. So these are all the steps that we do in the FSO Lab. But this would be, we could do this for Thousand Eyes too. Now, the nice thing about this, right, is the ease. They only have to install one tool. They can all flail around and experiment and have fun doing local development tasks. When they pass, they push everything to their branch, and then they get the reward of watching it build in the pipeline. Now, the nice thing about this too, as an instructor, you can kind of sit back and you can see when the pipelines have built because they're all green. So somebody who's having trouble or they have a mistake in their code, their pipeline's going to go red and stop, and you can very easily jump on. So I only have one pipeline set up here, and it's green. But ideally, I would have one for every student. So you can see down here under a different team, I have the SD1 pipelines, and this one's green, no errors, but this one's red. So if these pipelines belong to students, I could very easily, as soon as one went red, I can immediately click on it, see where the error that the student is having, and then I can help that individual student. So I can actually scroll down, it will tell me the line of code, everything where their error is. So let's go through, there's an error here. Oh, look, wrong AMI IDs, right? So it's from an instructor's perspective, it's a holistic view of how the lab is going for everybody. It's one way of running the lab. I'm not saying it's right for SD1, but I'm just throwing it out there. This architecture is very easy, very simple on the back end. essentially how I have it set up is I created one standard Gmail account, generated an SSH key for it. And when I and I give that limited access into the repo, so they can't merge to master, right? They can actually only push to their branch. So at the end of the lab, I just delete all the branches and I can run a new lab, right? It's super simple. The thing I like about this method too, is that it's giving them the real DevOps workflow. So this is the way they work at Microsoft. This is the way they work at EY. Any DevOps shops, they are building their code like this, usually in Concourse, sometimes in Jenkins, sometimes in GitLab, whatever. Sometimes they have a combination of a whole bunch of tools. But this one is super cheap. So this is all running on a Kubernetes cluster. It auto scales. Part of the cluster is on spot instance, so it's 90% cheaper. So I can literally run a lab for like an entire day. It costs like about $1 for maybe 50 people. So it's very inexpensive. No one needs special access into GitHub. No one needs to have anything installed locally. It's super simple. So if you're interested in it, I can explain to you more about it next week. And it's secure. Well, it's semi-secure, right? Because they could potentially intercept their container. Now, I don't teach them how to do that. But the chance that someone would know how to do that are pretty slim. But they could, for example, go like this, intercept, takes them right onto the container. And they could do a print env, and they can see like some tokens and stuff. Now, what I could do is that's because I don't have this stuff base64 encoded in the vault. So if we wanted to make it more secure, so I could base64 encode it, add some code in to encrypt this in the container so it's not actually visible. But anyways, this isn't a super big deal anyways, because these are just like limited access tokens into a specific lab in Thousand Eyes. So the Thousand Eyes lab is here. And this is one lab environment. I have 10. To be perfectly honest, it's not a big deal if someone gets that token and they blew everything out. I could just generate another token, update it in Vault, and 30 seconds later, we'd be up and running. So anyways, I just wanted to share that with you guys. And yeah, have a good weekend. Stop sharing. Stop recording.